Right. Okay. So yeah, I have a few. I think these are the same points that I sent to you, and we won't necessarily kind of ask every single one like, "What's your favorite color?" But we'll try and cover a few of the things. Um, but they're pretty quite obvious. Some of them, so like where or how you learn to draw and paint and things like that.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe we could talk about balancing kind of being a full-time artist with being a parent, because that's not something that I've spoken to someone about before. I feel it'd be quite interesting from like a male perspective as well, because obviously there might be differences in the way that you approach it or the way that you manage it.
I have a friend who she lives on somewhere up on Hill Lane, but she has 2 sons, and she's recently dived more into being a creative. She's doing a book. She might be a good person for you to interview as well, I think, because she, I think, has a lot of like she I think would like she's been looking into that, like just like being a parent, being creative, and sort of just doing other things, and like how people maybe talk to her and they're like, "Oh, how do you do it?" It's like you just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, she's probably an interesting person to talk to.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? If you're not a parent, I'm not a parent, I'm an auntie. I have nephews, but I don't have that kind of, I guess, permanent commitment every day that I need to look after my child as well. So if an idea strikes, I'm like, okay, let's go. Whereas other people...
Yeah. And I think also when you get like nephews and nieces, they're like, even before we had our son, and we have my sisters who'd hang out with my sisters' kids. I think they always perceive you as like when they're excited about being there, so they're going to be at their best. They're going to be, very rarely will they be like, "Nah, I'm just going to cause havoc."
Yeah.
So there's also just that bit of like, every time you give your child to an aunt or uncle, they're the best, and then the moment you take them back, they like sort of explode. But it's like,
my nephews do the opposite. They go nuts when they're around other people. I think it's maybe their like home environment. My sister's quite organized, I would say, in a nice way, and they probably feel more like they have to behave themselves. Whereas when they get out,
they're like, well, then she's probably didn't fight. So when you go there, mess everything up.
I don't know though. That's probably something to do with the environment as well. I bet you've got loads of fun stuff at home.
And I think because we sort of like, when my son he would run like to wrestle, like I'm like, okay. So you're like you sort of want that you don't want them to have tantrums, but you want the activity and the rowdiness.
Yeah.
And so the only thing is then when you have like a creative idea, because you've also nourished this very active behavior, you can't like be like, okay, now don't be active. Like, no, I want to wrestle now. And I'm like drawing. It's like, can you wrestle? You're like, oh, I guess. Yeah. It's not funny, but then you're like, it's like it's just like it just comes with it, I think. Because I was speaking to someone, another friend of mine, and they're like, oh, I don't think I can have kids, because they're like, before I thought I would want kids. And then she stayed with some of her friends and for a while, and then she saw how they were with the kids, and she was like, I don't know now if I can be with kids and also do all the things that I want. And then I was like telling her, like, it's like when you have kids, it's like comes with so much more, that all the the mess and the whatever they do suddenly becomes like it's very small, basically.
Yeah.
Like with all the good things that come with having kids. So I was saying, like, having a human being, a little human being who like, this person loves me 100% plus, like their love for me is like the most authentic and no strings attached. They're just like, and you're like, you can't get that necessarily from other people, because depending on how you make them feel, if you annoy them, they're going to be annoyed, right? But with kids, they're just like, my dad is Superman kind of thing. And you're like, you bet I am. Even though you're like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a mix. Like you get the storm, and then you also get the antidote to the storm when the storm comes. So when everyone's running away, you're like, yes, you're relishing in it, kind of thing. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah. I guess it ties into creativity in a way, doesn't it, as well? Because you're kind of, it sounds like a bit weird to put it this way, but it's almost like you're the master of their world, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're kind of making wherever those kind of limitations and boundaries are.
Yeah. Like you're sort of forming you're building their road as they're walking.
Exactly.
And you're like, go this way. And sometimes they want to go off there and you're like, no. When they get older, they might be like, no, I'm just going to go this other way. But when they're a child, and then whenever they're like in trouble or worried, they come back to you again, which is the funny thing with kids. So even if you'd like scold a child for doing something, they would still come to you for consolation or come to you to complain about you. So they'll come to you and be like, oh, Dad, which is when with like adults and all that, people would probably go and talk to someone else, or go and complain about you to someone else.
Yeah.
But then kids come and complain to you about you. And so you have to be the, you're the person's done the wrong thing. And then you're also the mediator. And you're like, okay, what have I done? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then you apologize and then you're friends. So it's like, it's that funny sort of mess. I guess sort of works with art because you are creating it and then you mess it up, but then you correct as well as the person who's building or making the artwork. Like you don't like make it and then, well, people can critique it, but at the end of the day, they don't fix it for you. You still have to go and and then depending on how you want it to be like, you can either check the critique or not be like, no, I like the way it is.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of the thing as well, isn't it? Like when is a piece of work finished, it's a bit like parenthood in a way, because your child can get older, but when you don't stop being a parent, do you? It's kind of where
the gap between like you and your dad has always been the same.
Yeah.
The age gap. Like you think you're getting closer, but you're like, no, you're not. Like our age gap is like the same when you're like one and when you're two.
That's so true. Yeah, that's definitely the case with me and my dad. I feel like he's the same person he was when we were kids, more or less. Whereas I'm probably the one who's grown up and changed more throughout that time.
Yeah.
Those are like formative years.
Yeah, but he's just like, and the thing is, I think it's funny when I had our son, I was like, some of the things my dad used to say sort of made sense now. So at times when I was like when I would be in uni, I'll call him and maybe be like, where are you? I'll be like, I'm just out. So I'm going to say, oh, it's late.
Yeah.
You can make sure you get home safe. And he'd probably end with, you guys, you don't know. When you get a child, you'll understand why I'm always like, I'm always asking where you are and what you're doing. And then when you're like, come on, you feel like I can do this. And then when we had our son, I was like, like you just get the things that come with like the attachment and the concern and the worry and how you sometimes catch myself being like, I'm being a dad now. When you're like when maybe they want to get dressed a certain way, you're like, oh, I'm being a dad. You start to like you can't help. Or you see teenagers now and you're like, whoa. I'm being that guy who I used to think was like, when you're a teenager and you're like, oh, you don't get passion.
Yeah.
Then now you look at teenagers like, you start to judge in your head like, oh, what's that? That we used to wear that when we were. You realize, oh, I am now becoming.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that.
Yeah, like now you relate to it and you're like, oh, now I get why they said. Like I remember when we were in primary school, for some reason, wearing your trousers really low was a thing. And people like found it so cool. But now, when I'm like, I like tried to wonder what it was that got into our heads and we all agreed together.
Yeah.
Like this trend is the it thing. Or like wearing rubber bands or, you have like the entire arm full of, and you're like, you grow up now, you're like, why did I go around town? And you pull out your sleeve so people can see, and identify yourself. That's the guy with that.
I remember that. The festival, like.
Yeah.
Cotton band things.
You don't take them off.
Yeah, you can't untie them, can you? You end up going in the shower and it just gets tired.
And it was like a thing, you're like, people need to know. I've been to many festivals. But then you go and like, they don't really need to know,
Yeah.
I don't, or you just don't find it as interesting anymore. And you're like, I wonder why at some point this thing was like, I just loved it so much. And now I'm like,
Yeah. That's such a good point. I feel like the way we think is probably quite similar because I watched some of your YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like listening to you talk. That's exactly how we think.
do you know? I always feel I think it's one thing when you do like podcasts or like digital content, and then you don't really know who's watching. But every time someone says, "Oh, I was looking at this," you're like, you feel like I'm gonna do another video because there's this one person who watches and they're like, yeah. So I appreciate that. That's very it's very very good to hear, because you can feel like your content is getting lost in the in the big sea of like other people's content video and stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really good point, actually. Just in terms of like kind of trends and how those come up, because I guess they're kind of relevant to artwork as well, aren't they? Sometimes if you want to sell work, it's kind of having a topic or a subject of the work that people are interested in, and you're like, I know I can sell something like this, but sometimes it's not what you feel like you want to do.
I get that. I get that a lot, of like what you want to do versus what people want. And in like video, in YouTube, they have this thing which they say, one for them, one for you, where like you do a video for the algorithm and you do it for yourself.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, that is like if you want to grow and get, but I just feel like I don't feel like I'm being true to myself when I do that, because I'm making this video, like the aim of the video isn't the video, it's what the video will bring. You're like, the aim of this is to either bring more, to attract certain people. But then if I'm doing one for them and one for you, it means I'm going to have 50% of my content is me, and 50% is stuff I did for other people. And as I grow, if this 50% of the other stuff is what I'm attracting and I don't really want to do it, do I then, I wouldn't want to stress about, I need to keep doing this thing because I need to keep these people. So yeah, it is, even with art and with painting, you like, I would go to galleries. I like going to galleries now, and I go to different towns, and just because I want to see how much stuff costs, and be like, so I should be charging £1 million. But yeah, it's sometimes I see the things that are. I remember going to a gallery in Bournemouth, and I saw these they're like prints of I think it's Mickey Mouse prints, and then there's splashes of paint on top of it. So, and I guess it depends on the eye of the observer. When I went up close, I realized, part of the Mickey Mouse was printed. It wasn't all painted.
Yeah.
And then as I was just walking down the gallery, I went downstairs, there's some more paintings, and the door to the workshop was open, and I could see the guy just doing getting these prints, doing the robs of painting there, and then he brings them up in the gallery and he puts them up for sale.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I was like, but then what I also realized was, in that gallery, there were like maybe 2 or 3 famous artists' work.
Yeah. So
my theory is then, if I want to sell something for, let's say, £40,000, I need to maybe go and get 1 or 2 big artists. So let's say I get a loan from a billionaire friend, wherever you are, if you're listening to this podcast, reach out. And then I'm like, can you lend me £100,000? And I buy 2 of these paintings. Then I put them in this gallery, and then I take or I take anything, just do anything to it and put it next to it.
Yeah.
So when people come in, when art collectors come in, they're like, he's got one of those, and he's got this one. So if that one is like 40,000, and I say, okay, this one is going to be 20,000. I feel like you'd be more inclined to buy this for 20, as opposed to if you just found this in my studio and you're like, who are you? I'm like, I'm just an artist, kind of thing. So there is also that. That's my theory, at least. There's the idea of when you move towards more art for commercial purpose. I feel like sometimes it can become too much about what's trending and sell that, as opposed to what does the painting mean, or what does this work mean, or what is it, as opposed to just being like, well, it's just the end thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, sort of counter that argument, I met someone at the Modesto Exhibition who told me, although our generation might see, a Mickey Mouse print with dabs of paint, that's not very, I might not be as attracted to that as much. She said her generation, who grew up with Mickey Mouse, from maybe when Mickey Mouse was the more colored version was coming in, when she looks at it, she is taken back to that moment. And so what people are buying is the nostalgia. So because the nostalgia doesn't connect with me, I might be like, I don't think that should be worth that much. But it's well, the people who that work is targeted for are people who are probably much older than me and probably can afford to spend that amount of money, and it depends on what that art is like invoking in them, and that's what they're going for, kind of a thing. I was like, yeah.
Is that how you define art? Is it something that kind of has to make people feel something?
So for me, I think my work, I wanted to do that because, and this is just personal, because I feel like at some point I'm like, I can draw, but I just can't draw. Like, I don't feel excited about drawing for the sake of drawing. You know, there are people who love to just, like, they would do portraits of people, like just realistic portraits of people. But for me, I'd be like, well, I know I can do it, but I don't feel like the push to do it because I can do it.
Yeah.
I want it to be like, I want it to have a meaning, or to invoke something, or to move people in a certain way, or to make people think because I do it in that way. So even if I was to do a portrait of you, I wouldn't just do a portrait. I want to make it in such a way that when people see it, they're like, oh, this is interesting, you know, like to excite imagination, I say now, or like to just like to look at it and say, okay, this is a beautiful painting, and then go beyond that and be like, yeah, but then what does it like mean, or what does it embody, what is like hidden in it, or what is it trying to say? And maybe that could be, maybe I might have like weird influences from people like Da Vinci, because when I was in primary school, I got this book called Magic in Art, and it had like different painters who had done all these like illusions and stuff, and I was like, ooh, that was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I think when I started like painting that type, I would always wonder like, okay, what can I, like, how can I push this idea so that it says something beyond just the painting? So like when you're like, oh, who's the Mona Lisa? Was it this person? Was it that person? What are those artists behind? Like when the picture sort of, you can't really define it at once. I think that for me is what interests me more. But I am also like, I do appreciate like really good art. Like if people do really good hyper-realistic portraits, I'm like, I appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
But for my personal, when I'm trying to make stuff, I want to make something that's beyond just skill, you know, beyond just like, I have this skill and I'm gonna express it, like something else that sort of tells and maybe reaches out to other people who initially would not maybe think of themselves as people who appreciate art. Yeah, that kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, because I didn't know this about you before, but when you got here, you were saying that you came from like an architecture background.
Yeah.
And it just made me think when you were talking, because I'd studied interior architecture as well as I had that kind of technical / creative education, which is quite a weird combination sometimes. But do you feel like that kind of shaped the way that you approach creating work now?
Yeah, definitely. Now, absolutely. I sometimes think that if you could study anything that will sort of broaden your thinking and just put you in a good place, I think architecture is one of those subjects, because it does, like you said, you do a lot of technical, maybe drawing and all that bit, you know, engineering, mechanics, but then you're like, now you have to also think of beauty and form and rather than just functions. I think with my art, it's sort of reverse, because art is usually mainly the beauty or the form. And then for me, it's like, okay, so what can the function be beyond making this wall look better?
Yeah.
Like, can it have another function of maybe challenging me intellectually, or like just making your mind do backflips as you're sat in the space and looking at it, beyond the fact that, oh, it's in the middle of the wall, it's at the right height, it's the right color, the room. Yeah. So I think architecture has definitely influenced. Yeah, I think it has.
Yeah, I think it's changed the way that I think about creativity as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I ended up going into digital marketing, which sounds weird, but it's almost like architecture makes you look at things properly, because not only do you need to kind of, you know, like articulate your ideas through drawing or whatever, but you're also physically interacting with those spaces. Like you measure them and you go into the really nitty-gritty detail.
And then you have to convince someone else to to trust what you've done.
Yeah.
And be like, one of my lecturers once told me, like, the role of an architect is, he was like, the role of an architect is to convince the client that your idea is their idea. Yeah. Like, your role is to take them on this journey to the point where they're convinced that what the idea on the table is 100% theirs, even if it has come from you.
Yeah.
So if they're not convinced, that's when you get like you have the friction, because you're like, oh, you should do this, and like, no, I want this. Then you haven't like managed to convince them.
Yeah.
Because you come with, like you're saying, with the technical knowledge, and maybe they're lacking something, but you just telling them, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, because it's how it's supposed to be, right? You're like, no, I want these 3 colors. And you're like, no, these are the colors that work together. But if you're able to put them to a place where they're like, they choose like, I want this, and this color, and in your mind you're like, these are the exact colors that I had since we met 6 months ago, then you have succeeded in not only making them think that your idea is their ideas, but then they now own the idea. So once you are done with the space and you leave, they are now able to continue, because the idea doesn't leave with you. You leave the idea with them, basically. And they adopt it and make it their own and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's interesting, and where kind of design and art meet as well, isn't it? Because design feels much more kind of down a predictable route, whereas with art, sometimes you're kind of,
you're like, let's get off the grid, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point, though. And I think it's kind of helping people into that creative process, isn't it? Because they're kind of like, I know what I wanted in my head, but I couldn't kind of visualize it or explain it, and you kind of kickstart that in a way.
Yeah, you're a catalyst to their creativities, and you like help build up something bigger if they don't have as much, or work with what they have, but make it work, basically. Because I have worked with people who are creative, but they come. Let's say you do marketing, right? So let's say I come to you for marketing, but rather than coming to you for marketing, it's like, I want to tell you the marketing, and all I want you to do is to do the marketing for me, as opposed to
that happens a lot.
Yeah, so I think I've come across, and my little brother, he does a bit of fashion and photography, and he says, this phrase says, I tell people that I'm not a photocopy machine. So people are like, oh, can you make this dress? He's like, no, I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not a photocopy machine. But he's like, but you can go to that person. They can replicate what I do. Is I design from, like, I can make something custom for you. But if you want me to replicate something, he's like, I'm sorry, I do not photocopy. I'm not. He basically said, I'm not a photocopy machine.
It's kind of sticking to your guns as well, isn't it? So I think there is a massive element of kind of confidence in not just creativity, but kind of putting your work out there as a product or selling things and stuff like that. It's kind of like, you could go there if it's got the commercial aspect, and someone could say, oh, it's really good, but let's tweak this thing and this thing, and then it becomes something else. Yeah.
And I think the co-production and co-production of work is very tricky, because although to an extent you're like, when you have something and you take it to someone else and they're like, let's tweak, it could be seen as them improving your design, but it is also them putting their stamp, like them demifying your design. So like I bring an Edgar design and you daisy it, as opposed to
leaving it as an Edgar.
Or like, let's improve Edgar's design. You are now daisying the design as well. And so I think being able to recognize that, oh, now you're inputting, you're bringing something that isn't of this, and like being confident to also say it, I think it can get challenging, because of like, you want people to, especially if like the people you're talking to you look up to, and then they're like, oh, I think maybe we should do it this way, and you're like, then you're like, if I say it, will it come off, So I think your confidence does play a big role, like be confident in what you're doing, and sticking to your guns, like you said.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people listening to this will probably recognize your work from the John Hansard Gallery if they don't recognize you or know you by name already.
So I think people don't. It's funny. I think people wouldn't connect me to it. And when you tell them, they're like, I've told so many people, they're like surprised, like, oh, I'm like, yeah. Maybe because I don't, I'm not great at, like even with the John Hansard, I don't think I've done a proper post on Instagram about it yet.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the creative mindset of, I have so many ideas that I'm going to do one day, but I think it's, yeah, it's interesting when you see other people do stuff and you envision like, oh, they must be this, and then you do it, and then you're like, what is, you know, you it's like I've done it and I'm not even, plus, you know, like my mind is thinking of, oh, where am I going to get the next client? You know, it's like you've done it and you're like, oh, the most stressful bit was getting it done. Maybe the happiest bit is seeing it out for the first time, and then like after maybe a week, you're like, yeah, you get used to it, and you're like, okay, now I need to, and then you realize how normal it is for other people who are probably like, sometimes I sit and look at people walking past, and sometimes I've seen people like stop and be like, and they just keep walking, but other people you just see like they just walk past just as much as I walk past other murals by other artists, you know, like I'm like, okay, that's great. And I think maybe there's a bit of thinking like, oh, mine is going to be the head turner. But then you put it up there and you realize, oh, you're one among many, and you can stand out if you want. But it is, I think, even to stand out, you need to also like just doing the work doesn't get it done. You know, you need to, at least I think nowadays, you need to go extra. I think back in the day, when you look at like these old artists who like were starting movements, when they, I think, is it this one, what's his name? Jackson Pollock? Jackson Pollock, the one with like the dots.
Yes.
So when he started it, it was like, wow. But now if you do it, people are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you do it, let's say you do it consecutively, and you're maybe on social media, you're sure, like, unless you really, you do like 1,000 hours version of that, then it becomes you, as opposed to being like, oh, this is the style of Jackson. It becomes like, oh, this is Edgar's thing, which I think maybe I'm not as good as I want to be now. And that's why when you told me my mom, I was like, oh, the you know, putting yourself on social media might be much easier for you because you like, not even you.
No.
Well, then there's no hope for the customers. If you listen to this, just quit.
That's terrible advice.
No, I'm kidding. I was talking to a friend of mine today. He designs brands. And I showed him I was like, I'm Playful podcast. And he was looking at your Instagram. He was like, ooh, it's got good branding, good color. I was like, yeah, she does marketing. I was like, 'cause, like, everything looks so well put together. And even he was able to notice, like, oh, she's got like all her things done. So
I don't know. I think that's where I stumbled, because before we started recording this, I was saying to you last night that I did the first season and that went really well, and then I went to the second season. I think it's because I started with something I was comfortable with, so doing the colours and doing the logo and the graphic design and all of that kind of stuff. And now it's going into kind of unpredictable territory where it's just the conversations with people, and I don't know what people can say. And yeah, I try to be honest and vocal about struggling with being in front of the camera and saying something weird because I like stumbled over my words. I don't know. Yeah, no, it's very much like my creative outlet now is just kind of, I like to be uncomfortable now. That's us.
Oh, that's what you look for.
Right.
You're going to the next podcast in like outside the train station. Just pushing it. And then the next one is you're going to be on the train. So we're here on this train. I need to be uncomfortable. I think that is very normal. And it's even like, I remember it's funny, when before I started the YouTube channel, I used to look at YouTubers and every time they'll be like, hey guys, I'll be like, oh, another one of those hey guys, you know? Yeah. And then when you started, you're like, hey guys, you're like, you know, you become a hey guys kind of person. And I think once you do it like, you know, a few times, you realize, oh, it's not as, like, you realize there's a lot of stuff that's been edited out, all the ums and ahs, those are all gone.
Yeah.
And then you also realize that it's like, it's just like a thing, you know, and you're like, oh, there's like because when you watch YouTube, you don't see the bit of recording and editing. There's a way you perceive it. It's like the shoes, the sports brand shoes that we're getting, I think some bad press for having the shoes manufactured with like unfair wages and working, you know. Okay. So before you know that, the way you see that shoe is different. The moment someone tells you, oh, by the way, this type was made and these are all the things that have gone wrong with that, your perception immediately changes, even though the shoe is the same. So same with YouTube. When you watch videos, before you do any of it, you have a perception of the people, the things they say, and then the moment you start doing it and you like join the group, you're now behind the scenes, literally behind the scenes. You're like, hey guys, please hit the subscribe button,
click the notification
bell down in the comments, yeah. In the description below, like all these phrases that used to be like, oh, everyone is saying that. You realize, oh, that is the language. That is, and then you also realize the focus isn't on those. It's like on what you're making.
Yeah.
So I think like the fear of being in front. I remember I used to like try and put like a toy or something, so like draw my attention away, because it's so difficult to talk into camera. And I think again, before you do any of the YouTube videos, you don't realize that you're by yourself when you're recording this.
Yeah.
Like when you're watching it, you feel like, oh, this person is talking to me, but in reality, it's talking to like this is the stand, camera, in an empty room. So yeah, it's an eye-opening experience in itself. And yeah, I think people who like say things about YouTubers, I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm like, but you've not made a video before. So
yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's easy to think certain things and have a kind of opinions, which is fine. Everyone's entitled to them, but until you kind of put yourself in that situation and you're kind of like, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm gonna do it
and then you realize, and then I think it makes you even more empathetic towards those people.
Yeah.
There's a YouTuber, he's a woodworker. One time he was in a commentary on his video, was like, someone in the comments told me that I shouldn't do it like this and this. So I had a great idea. I was thinking that maybe you can make the table with that method you suggested, record it, and then I'll watch it, and then I can see what to do. So it was sort of saying like, there are people who like are very good at telling him how I should have done it, but they don't do it themselves. So I found that interesting. Like, I remember when I was that guy who would be like, oh, you should have done this way. It's funny, actually, my little brother, because he was into photography, I once asked him to make me a quick music video. So I used to rap with some friends back in Tanzania, and I was like, can you make me a quick music video? And then later when I got into YouTube and I did some course in Premiere Pro, I sent him like a message, like a funny one, being like, I'd like to apologize for that. For that time I used the word quick music video in the same sentence. Like, I'm very sorry. I did not know what I was doing. I repent of because when you don't know, you're like, yeah, just make it quick, and then you show someone a video like this. Yes, these colors, you feel like it's just like, it's like, just press this button and it's the sound editor, this button's for color.
Yeah.
So I sent a mission, I was like, I'd like to apologize for what I said about this quick music video. There was like no such thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like you were saying though about your work being on the outside of the gallery. It's kind of, it becomes embedded in the culture, doesn't it? Like everyone's on their phone, they see all these videos all the time. So you kind of come to the conclusion that it must be quick because you see so many of them.
Yeah.
Just like.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. With what I've even trying to do now with YouTube, I think the thing that has made me not to post as much is I want to like sort of find a way to showcase that work bit. Like today, imagine if you had an episode on a YouTube channel that was just about setting up.
Yeah.
It's just the micro episode, even if it's like 3 minutes of just you arranging the space. Because you have to do it every time, checking the camera, setting up the stand, the chair, the light, adjusting every single time. But when people see the podcast, they don't see that bit. They don't know like all the things you have to do to make it so that you can have the finished thing. They don't see the editing. Yeah. So imagine if there was just videos of just editing. You just starting out. It's like maybe 3 hours. You just.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably longer than the podcast itself. Or just a video of all the ums and ahs that you've cropped.
I tried to do that recently, and there weren't as many as I thought there would be.
Or you collect them for like maybe season 1's ums and ahs.
Exactly. Like the blooper reel.
Yeah.
That goes wrong.
Yeah.
That would be so good. Yeah. I think it would take a while, but it would be funny.
Yeah. I was thinking of it, but then I was like, do I have the patience to go through all the video? What I should have done is every time I was deleting them, I should have been compiling this video somewhere so I could cut and you play.
Yeah.
So I should just have them.
I tried to start doing that, kind of like anything that I take out, then moving it somewhere else to become a new thing. It's almost like, it's like rubbing out, isn't it? You know, when you're a kid and you're drawing, they're like, no, don't use the rubber. Don't put the rubber even on your table, nowhere near you. Just like whack around it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same with
the ums and ahs.
Yeah, with anything. Like, we're so, I think it's ingrained, isn't it? It's like, you can't make a mistake kind of
thing. Like you're pursuing this version of perfection, which is, I think it's slightly unattainable, but also maybe creating attainable, but also it's not, you end up with a version of you that isn't like you know?
Yeah,
it's like a
polished
version of you, which isn't you. So people would meet you on YouTube and be like, oh, you're this person. Then meet you and they're like, you know, they're like, you look like someone I know, but you talk different.
Yeah.
You know, or you sound different. And that's because of like building this personality for social media, which is, I guess, again, it's like just you're pleasing people that you don't know, in the sense that you have an idea, you are assuming an audience, and then you're assuming what your audience are thinking, and then you are creating a character based on the assumption of an assumption. So it's like, so far we're removed, and maybe it would work for some people.
Yeah.
But then when those people meet you in real life, they have an expectation of this thing that you've like created, which is, so far out from you. And then it's like, and I think at some point you might just get tired of being that. Yeah, and maybe, I think I've seen it with so many YouTubers who started a certain way, and then they just are like, you know, and then YouTubers say it all the time, we used to do this, but then you like you do it for a while, then you sort of fall into your space, which I found a bit difficult, which is funny, because I think I had like, I don't know, it's like maybe 200 subscribers. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, if I change my content, what's going to happen? You know, you feel like this.
Video.
Pivoting. Yeah. So you're like, what's going to happen to all these 200? As if they're like out there on the, like they're in a meeting room with a big screen, you know, and they meet every Wednesday to watch.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, not really. People, you know, people are just people as well. And maybe when you pivot, they could be, maybe if you have 200, maybe there's 203. If you pivot, and then you have 3 more, and that's, you know, 3 should be worth something. Yeah.
But I think also it's like, I think there's almost like a power in your voice and kind of saying things out loud. Like I think you said in your video, when you kind of set that up and you don't kind of decide what you're going to say and make it perfectly scripted and stuff. You hear yourself speaking your thoughts, and it almost becomes another thing, because then you're like, wait, why am I thinking that? And I was saying it to myself because I thought it, and it's like this weird loop.
That's an episode of, why are you thinking that? It reminds me of this guy. He was like, I have a question. Why do I remember that I've forgotten something, but I cannot remember what I've forgotten? He's like, I absolutely remember that I've forgotten something for sure, but then I can't remember the thing. And he's like, it's just like that. Yeah, the thing of like, you say something and then you're sort of, as you're thinking and saying it, you're also like processing and wondering, why am I saying this? And I think it's even more funny when you listen to it, let's say a week later, and it still hits you, and you're like, you wonder what was I thinking to have, you know, you're like, it's almost like as if someone else is saying it, but you're like, no, that was me, and I was saying it. And it's like, it's like you're talking to yourself in a way, like you're time traveling and you're meeting yourself, but then you're like, how are you me? And but you know it's you. But then you're sort of like, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's that moment that you can kind of suddenly, I don't know if you get this, but sometimes I have really tiny moments in time where I see myself as just a person and not me in the body of me. It's very weird.
You sort of like see yourself. Like you sort of, or you remember looking at yourself. You'll be like, and then you're like, wait, because I do have moments like that when you remember a moment not as you were in it, but you remember it as you were seeing yourself in it, or you're doing something and you're like, oh, this is the person Edgar, and then you go back to like, oh,
exactly, like dissociation or something.
Not
in a bad way, just kind of.
It's so interesting, and I think things like that for me when I'm doing like my art is what like those are the things that I want to sort of like how do you take that feeling that is so like it's in your head, you see it but like you see it but it's not 2D, it's not 3D, and then like how do you convert that into like a 2D image and still have the feeling of in this case like the dissociation, but not it being, because when it happens you don't like literally move around the corner and you're like, oh, hi Daisy, I'm Daisy, it's like it's happening at the same time. So like how do you take that same concept and put it on like a 2D surface and make it so that it is not, that it is dynamic, even though it's represented in static, but make it so that it's like it's moving even though it's not moving. So I think that's
I think that's why, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think maybe when I did GCSE art and things like that, kind of got started in making work, I found that a lot of people who make art kind of end up with the same subjects. So a lot of the time you see people doing kind of self-portrait stuff, whether it's a painting or a photograph or whatever, and it's kind of like, if they do it on the computer, they might kind of overlay things, where it's almost like it starts with you and then you have kind of different opacities and they kind of show that dissociation feeling through that. But you also see it in lots of other topics of like, I don't know, being out in public and watching strangers and kind of thinking about what their lives might be like. Or...
I do that a lot. But I'm just like, I look at someone and I like try to think. I do this a lot with older people. I try to think, I wonder how it felt when they were like 5. Or like, I wonder what they felt when they was like 3. It's so easy to go about, and that I don't know if you ever felt this as a kid, where you felt like that the life was a movie and you are the main character, and you're like convinced, like you're on screen somewhere. In my mind, there was the family friends of ours, and I was convinced they watch us on a TV for some reason.
I think, So for anyone who's not watching the video, I have these cards on the table and they're kind of conversation prompts, but I tried them out a few weeks ago, I think it was. I was sat here, like we were saying, with the camera just on me. So I was like, I need something to talk about. And one of those was actually what's something you believed when you were younger that makes you laugh now? And that was my one, like kind of trying to work out how the TV worked, because I just didn't understand broadcasting. I was like, what is it that I watch the TV and this thing that I want to watch just appears, but it's never at the beginning. It's always like part way through. I'm like, someone else watching this?
Oh, you're like, why? Like there's someone who's been watching and you're like, where are they? And you're like, and then when you grow up, it's like, no, it's just broadcasted. It's been running. It's like when you realize shows were repeating. Before you knew it, you'd be like, oh, like you think like it's the show is like one continuous, like there's some sort of continuous, I don't know, tape that's playing somewhere before you understand how things work. And so you're like, oh, that's going to go and it's gone forever. And your mind sort of fills in the gaps with whatever it is that it wants to fill the gaps with, whether it's people watching your screen or someone else watching your show. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that people try and hold on to as well, isn't it? It's kind of that playful and innocent mentality. And it's quite hard to retain when you're an adult. It's kind of like not knowing the answer to everything. And especially with social media now and the internet, it's kind of like you can Google whatever question you want. There's and I feel like
that when you look at like when you look at like old movies where there was like there was some that was mysterious and what is this? But now you're like, oh, that is this. Like you can explain anything. I feel like it removes the need for curiosity, and then that makes it's like back in the day where you're like, oh, there's these uncharted forests. There might be a random creature, but now when you go, you're like, oh, this is the forest. These are how many frogs there. These are the type of frogs are there. These are how many beetles there. These are so everything you see, you're like, oh, that's that beetle. You're not expecting anything. You're just going. And I think speaking of my son, I think that's the thing that I see in him that sort of takes me back to. It's like, again, you feel like you are time traveling, because my dad will speak to me. I'll speak to my son. So I'm like, I'm a child, and I have a child, and so you are seeing like you're sort of getting a glimpse of what you used to do when you were maybe 3, 4, or 5, which you don't remember. Especially when your parents are like, "Oh, you used to do the same thing."
Yeah.
I had no idea to do it. And then you're also now like sort of, you are now in the where you are now as an adult, being parented, and then you also have a parent that you're like that is where you are, and that's where you're going. You're getting older, so you can see where your parent is. You are where you are, and then you see children, and you sort of are reminded of. You're reminded of that the innocence you're talking about. And then I asked myself, like, why is it then? Why do we, like, the thing of like you're saying people want to retain it? I asked myself, why do we not go for it? Like, when you give my son a paper and you're like, "Can you paint something?" Takes a brush, dips it, immediately. He doesn't like, what's trending? What are people gonna like?
Yeah.
What colors are in? What shape? It's like, just go immediately. Takes another paper, takes another paper. And I'm like, that is what I also want to, like, I want to find again, I think, because I think there is so much freedom in that. Because you are just you. Like you are, I look at my son and he's like, he just exists as himself, That's who he is. Now I'm over in the park. I've met a random child. Let's play. Don't know who you are. We're playing. It's time to go home. Oh, and my friends, he complains about friends that he just met like 30 minutes ago, And then they hug, bye. Never gonna see them ever, maybe. Goes home, now it's dinner time. I'm gonna eat. Like, it's like, it's just being themselves and that being enough, as opposed to I have to be myself, but I also have to. And I think if people are able to get to that, I think like there'll be so much more, like you'd be at peace and with more joy, because some anxieties that are associated with what people think or what people might say or what people think of what you're creating, what other people are creating. I don't know if you get this, where you look at other people and you're like, "Oh, my friends have done all this," or you're like, "Oh, this person is 14 years old and they made this work, or they're doing this," or you look at Will Smith's children and you're like, "Why don't I have more money?"
Yeah.
But then with kids, they don't. I think the only person, maybe my son, that would be really happy to meet is David Attenborough, but that's only because he likes the documentary. I don't think he's going to be like, "Give me an autograph." He's not gonna. He's going to be like, "Oh, that's the person that I know from what and he knows him as the scientist." But I think as adults, we have already attached maybe status to people. We've attached, different things to different people. And so when we see them or interact with them, that layer or whatever it is attached sort of is like a filter that either distorts their image or makes it what it isn't, or maybe enhances what it is. Yeah. And so it when it comes to like being creative, you go on Instagram to post something, but before you post something, you've seen like 10 other people and you're like, maybe I'll post this. Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just being, this is me, here I go. That's one thing I find a bit difficult these days. Of every time even if I go to Instagram just to look for, like, I think I was going to look for your podcast at some point, but at some point I was like, what am I doing here? Because you're like, where am I? You don't even. You're like maybe 30 reels later.
Yeah.
You're like,
you go down the rabbit
hole.
hole.
And you're like, I was definitely going to look for something.
I do that as well.
Yeah.
I tried not to. I think it's got worse since I started my job because I have to be on my phone.
Yeah.
Is that something? Do you ever think about that with your son growing up and kind of being immersed in that world where everyone's on social media?
So my plan, I mean, people can check this every time we do this podcast and be like, "Why is the plan going?" What I remember growing up, my dad would get me to do a lot of like work around the house or work with him where he was like a lot of hands-on things. And then I became very hands-on in like I would make my own toys. I think that's how I probably ended up in architecture, but I would like paint. I got very into making things, right? Like even the desk I use right now, my office, I built it from like scratch. I went to Southampton Recycle Center.
Some wood recycling.
Yeah, so I got like cheap wood. It's what is it called? It's like chips of wood compressed together to make a panel. It looks really. People use it for like it's supposed to be used for like maybe internal bits of a wall, but the look of it is industrial. Some people just put it.
Chipboard, isn't it?
Yeah, probably like chipboard. And so I got some of that and built like an entire table. And it's not easy material to build, but because I was like, I want this look, and I can't. The same table size, would be expensive to buy. It's like, I'm just going to build it. So I think my idea is if I can instill that version of creativity to my son and make him like be more interested in the process or the work rather than the result.
Yeah.
And then he probably sees social media in the same way and not maybe be like not get distracted by it, but maybe use it for, I don't know, for like, I don't know, for like as a way to enhance whatever it is it's doing. There's a YouTuber called Make with Miles. He, I think, did his first.
The music.
No, he's a woodworker guy.
Oh, okay.
And he did his first, I think, project when he was like 14 or maybe 12. And so seeing him, and I'm like, it's because now he can do so many things. He's gone to, he's had a YouTube channel for a long time.
Yeah.
He's met all these other creators, and he went to uni to do product design. But when I saw him, I was like, yeah, that's a good example of if I can plant a seed of like creativity, and then somehow make you see social media as a tool to enhance this other thing, then, you know, hopefully that for me will work itself out. Or hopefully by the time he's on social media, there'll be another, maybe robots will be the new thing, you know, but in order to be on social media, but we'll just have like, yeah, humanoid robots and stuff like that. So yeah.
I'm kind of hoping that by the time that kind of generation will be a bit older and be teenagers or young adults, will be at a stage where there's more value to things that have been made physically by hand. Because I think we are going down this kind of route of everything being on the computer and being digital and AI, and those are amazing things to have, but it's kind of like you say, seeing them as tools and not the kind of end result, and allowing yourself to kind of play around and just get things wrong as well. I think we're so scared of that now, even probably more so than we were before. It's like, can't do that wrong. Can't
like,
be a beginner.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to like start at the top. And I feel like my prediction is, again, people can check me on this later, that in the future there's going to be more, like there's going to be, people are going to want more handmade or I don't know what you call it, like physical things rather than digitally made, or I don't know how to explain this, but it's like, an example I use is when people used to make tables with saws, right? And then let's say they made the circular saw, the power tools. You would think like all these people who are making saws would be like, oh no, we're going to lose to these other things. But now, if you go to IKEA and you have something that's been made, you know, it works, it's quick. It's not, I mean, it's efficient. They've taken out the wood, put carpet in the middle. It's not as expensive compared to maybe something that has required more machining or more work to it.
Yeah.
So I feel like in the future, because technology is going to become so prevalent and everyone is going to be able to do it, it's the same. A good example is YouTube. Like the number of, I think, views you needed to get monetized when maybe it started monetizing is not the same today, or to get those plaques.
Yeah. So
it means like the more people can do something, the higher the stakes become, or the levels become. So I think with technology, once everybody can access, let's say, philosophy of art, for example, if anyone can go to Midjourney and type in a prompt and get the work. So what is going to be of value is because it's going to be something that isn't that, not necessarily because it's different, but just because not necessarily because it's more complicated, but just because it is different. Just as much as if someone is telling you, if you bought this chair 40 years ago, and you had it in this condition, and then I had the version of the same chair 40 years now. This 40 years old one is gonna, in some areas, cost more than the honest new, because of the sentiment, the nostalgia, the human touch, all those embedded experiences, which you might not necessarily not get with digital products, because of the fact that they are the same. Like if I make a digital art today, it's not going to deteriorate 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
It might be of lower quality if they get to a higher quality of images, but it's not going to deteriorate. But with a chair, it's affected by climate, it's affected by touch. So all those little bits then, you can market those as a selling point.
Yeah.
And then you can imagine if, let's say, with vintage cars, at some point they were just cars. This is what everyone had, you know. But now you're like, oh, look at that. But when the first came out, it's just 1 of 100, you know, 1 for, you know, it's like 1 over 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my theory is that in the future, with the more technology improves, more handmade things are going to become of more value. But also, I think with AI and with like supercomputing, I personally don't think like their threshold is we need to get to a point where we can draw a painting, right? I think their vision is way beyond. They're not mentioning it so that like their target isn't let's make this supercomputing machine so that it can make a painting. A painting may be a challenge, it does.
Yeah.
And the reason it is even that is a challenge is because it's being contested against the human being's ability, right? So even the machines they're always trying to do what humans are already doing, kind of a thing. But I think like the use of them is maybe higher. It could be maybe for, let's say, just on a while, like let's say interstellar planetary travel or time travel, right? So I'm guessing that people who are doing the supercomputer, I want to create calculation that can, you know, make us, you know, like get to time travel. On the way, we did do Midjourney and we did do this AI and this platform, but those were not the end goals.
Yeah.
So when I think of it that way, I'm like, well, there's still potential for artists in that way. But then the other thing is people will also still people will go where people want to go. If someone wants AI art, they will go to get it.
Yeah.
If someone wants not AI art, they will look for it. And if you think of it in that way, then you're like, okay, then I'm safe. Because there is someone out there who is still buying, you know, all these artists who died hundreds of years ago, even though there's new artists today, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all those paintings aren't reduced in price because there's more. They're actually going up, kind of. If you know what I mean. So I think if you look at it in terms of there's probably always someone or somebody for whatever it is that you're doing, and then you're creating for those people. And I think I've heard it said like, imagine you had just 1,000 people who are dedicated to you, and the world has like, is it 7 billion or 8 billion? 8, and the population is only increasing.
Yeah.
Right. So you can imagine like 1,000. If you calculate 1,000 over 8 billion, that is 1/8 million is the fraction, isn't it? 1/8 million. Because a billion has 9 zeros. Yeah. So it'll be 1/8 million is the only people that you need to get to sort of like just get by. Because if 1,000 people all gave you £100 a month, for example, then you'd have £100,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so for 10 months, you'll have £1 million.
That's a good way to think about it, actually.
Yeah.
I think people get so caught up in numbers now, especially because of social media. It's like 200's nothing. When actually, if you think in the grand scheme of it, I don't know, 200 followers in a month or something like that.
Yeah.
That's quite an achievement.
Yeah. It's better you have like 200 dedicated people. And I think Patreon does a good job of this. I'm not on it yet, but I think that's what it does. It takes these core fans and it's like, these people are going to support you, which is much better than having 1,000 followers. But because you haven't reached a certain metric of, let's say, YouTube that is always increasing, you are not going to be getting anything. But if you're on Patreon and you have 500, but everyone is like, say, going to give you $10 a month, that's $5,000 already.
Yeah.
And if you view it in that, and I think also maybe there's an element, even, I think it's just human nature, with just wanting, maybe slightly it's greed, but also just wanting more, you know? It's like, rarely do you see someone say, oh, I just got a new job and I'm getting a pay rise, I'm going to downsize, you know?
Yeah.
You're always like, now we're gonna go for that house. You know, it's very easy people who are like,
So true.
I just got a raise, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to downsize, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, you know.
Actually enjoy the money rather
Yeah.
than spend it on the
Exactly.
house.
They're like, I've made an achievement, I'm going to go out. Which restaurant did we used to go? Now that I've got a raise, we're going to go to the next one. Right? It doesn't like, so it's like with everyone sort of has that in them to an extent. People who are let's say lower class are looking to go to the middle class, and the middle class is looking to go higher. Rarely do you see someone who's like, oh man, I'm just working so hard so I can move back to the let's say to a certain area of town that is known to be like, oh, that's a very low income area. You know, people are like, oh, I want to move out. I want to take my kids to a better school. You know, everyone is sort of, so I think even with creatives, there is that pull of, you know, just wanting more, especially when you have like an illusion of, you know, there's like an illusion of it could be a possibility.
Yeah.
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 So you're like, oh, maybe it can. And then you lose on, like, you lose yourself, and you start chasing this target that is in itself like always moving as well. So
Yeah. Is that a kind of goal for you then?
to get lots of money.
Well, I guess it seems like you're kind of looking to build a community in a way.
I think so. Is that what it seems like?
It's
I'm trying to run for king. So I'm trying to build a following. I think for me, I have this thing I say to people that I want to get a house in Chilford.
Okay.
But the reason I say is, I think you came to the exhibition, and I had really high prices, and a lot of people told me that. But I think it's part of it is my faith. I'm like, I believe it's possible.
Yeah.
But not because I'm like gonna, you know, it's not like it's like a ridiculous goal that is still achievable. Because if not, then that's where if it's not achievable, then that's where you put the question, oh, why is it not achievable? And, you know, people listening might be like, oh, this guy's a dreamer. But then ask yourself this, like when someone was like, we want to go to the moon, right? Like out of nowhere, we're like, oh, we need to go to that city. Everyone's thinking horizontal. Someone's like, I don't go to the moon.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? It's like, you just want to go to go, you know, it should have been much better if there's like, we discovered there is a cure of a certain disease. And so we have to, it was like, I want to go, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone thought of it and then worked to make it into a reality, when they were thinking and trying it, it was an impossibility, right? Once they have done it, then it becomes normal, and people no longer look at it as like. So that is the reason why I say like, I want to have a house in Chilford. Is it improbable when you look at it? Could be. Is it impossible? Could be. Why do I believe I can? Why not? Like the question is, why not? And then you start to ask yourself, what do I need to do to achieve this thing? And then maybe in answering that question, you would sort of like solve or resolve other things that are keeping you from just doing, you know, because you're setting yourself a sort of quote unquote impossible goal.
Yeah.
But by people do say reach for the stars, but I can't reach for the stars, but I could probably, you know, reach for Chilford because it's there. And the other thing is because people are already there. Like imagine if you just went and knocked on the door and you're like, ask someone, how did you end up here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People sometimes do say people have generational wealth, and I'm like, okay. But I have met people who have come from nothing as well. So why have they been able to do it? And what is like, how can I get to my version of that? So maybe I don't want to be where they are, but like where am I and what do I have that I'm just taking for granted, right? And I did realize this, that I think sometimes, I think Denzel Washington said, he said, ease is a greater threat to success than hardship. And when I moved to the UK, when I was in Tanzania, I used to like draw casually, you know, like I'll draw here. I mean, I drew a lot, but it was more of like you know, I can draw, you're the guy who can draw, right? When I moved to the UK and I tried to get work in architecture, which is what I went to uni for.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it because of the difference in how just the architecture structures are set up.
Okay.
I was like, okay, so I need to start this business, right? And I'd always felt in my spirit like that was what I should do. Like it's like one of those things where you're like, you know, when it's like with the podcast, you're like, oh, I need something creative, and then you look on the set and your camera's just there. You're like, but no, I need to find that, and then you look
something else.
Yeah, something else, and then there's a book of like how to do a podcast. You're like, but no, there's something. So I think that's what I treated my art like. And then when that hardship came to me, I was like, okay, I want to make money. And the thing that people would see as ideal, like you did architecture degree, definitely go for that. Or work at another place as you look for work in your process, like try working at like maybe Tesco's or any other job as you look for work in architecture. And if you look at like maybe the pay structures, you might be like, what's more stable, again, quote unquote stable, meaning like, you know, it's assured every month.
Yeah.
But then if you were to go the route of graphic artists as a self-employed business, all of a sudden the thing you see is risk. what if you don't get clients? Everyone you talk to, they're like, oh, I don't know anyone who's succeeded in doing this, right? Like everything you see on that side is just like you just see like it's not gonna work. But it's saying things like I'm gonna get a house tour that causes you to be like, why? What is it that's not gonna work, right? And then you're being wise, right?
Yeah.
What is it that's not gonna work? And then you're like, how many of these things that are not gonna work are just me? Are basically fear, like fear as in the fear of starting. And then once you're not starting, then you start thinking of when I start, this will happen, this will happen, this. So then you're already built again, you're building the hypotheticals of what might happen. And then you build another hypothetical for, when that happens, then this is going to happen. It reminds me of a funny story where there were these two guys fighting. They were like fighting, going at each other. And then someone comes like, what's wrong? I was like, well, he picked up 1,000 pounds. We were both together. We saw it together. He picked it up. And I was like, well, since we're together, you need to give me 500. But he's like saying he's only going to give me 300. And I was like, no. And so they were arguing. And then the guy was like, okay, wait. So who found the thousand? This guy found it. Where is it now? I was like, oh, it was just a hypothetical. The question was, it was like, so you're arguing on, it was like, yeah, he just said, what if we found? He was like, so you've been fighting here because of like this. Yeah. So I think that's what happens with you start off with like a fear of starting, and then you think of what's going to happen. And then by the end, you're like 30 years in the future of all the things that have gone wrong because you start to think that you've never done.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, have you tried to do it?
Yeah.
You're like, no. So I had to like overcome all that and be like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And the moment I like went for it, things just sort of opened themselves up. And then you realize like sometimes the thing that keeps people from not succeeding in this area is because of the perception or the fear or insecurity or imposter syndrome that tells you what will happen, but you never really know. Like it's not based on, oh, actually I did do it for 3 years and yes, this and this and this happened, right? And you look at all these other great creative gurus and they're always saying the thing of like, I just have to start. Like they're all telling you the thing that you are saying is going to go wrong. They're like, do it. And you feel like, oh, they're just being, when you watch them, like with the YouTube again, you feel like, oh, they're just saying it. But then when you actually want to start something, you're like, oh, this is what they meant. Yeah. And like, you just have to overcome that fear, I guess. Yeah. And it like never really goes away. Even when you achieve something, you're still like. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we were talking about this just before we pressed record as well, because I think you asked me about when I kind of started the podcast.
Yeah. And when did you like actually decide to be like, I want to start a podcast?
Yeah. And actually, I couldn't remember because, sometimes once you've got past that hurdle, you kind of forget what happened before, which I try not to do, but it's quite tricky. I think in response to your question of starting the podcast, it very much ties into what you're saying. I think I had a real struggle with anxiety and I got used to being scared of everything. And I got to a point where I was like, well, the fear is kind of helpful because when everything's scary, it's all on the same level. It's not like, oh, there's a lion over there. I'm really scared. And that's why I'm going to jump off a cliff into a swimming pool. I'm just like a little bit scared, but it's not bad. It's just like flatline. Yeah. So I was like, well, it scares me and I want to do it. So I just have to like get past that first step. And once you get started, I think that's what people kind of mean as well when they say about, just do it. Yeah. Which is kind of annoying when you see the videos because there's always someone who's already done it. You're like, but you're not in the same position.
This is the thing with when you go and talk to people who have been in a relationship for years. You're like, oh, how do you do? They're like, don't worry. You're like, what do you mean? Don't worry. I'm not 30 years in. I'm just like at the beginning, of course. But they're like, it's gonna be fine. And you're like, no.
Give me a shot.
Yeah, because they're talking to you from the future again. And you're like,
exactly.
Yeah. Isn't it funny though how when you start, like how that fear that was so like paramount, and the moment you like, it's like a huge mountain. And the moment you start, you realize that it was a hologram, and probably like just this thing. You're like, oh, yeah. But the funny thing is, every time I want to do something again, which scares me, it's like you never learn. It's like you put back in that place again, and you have to remember like, oh. But this happened. There's a story in the Bible about Jesus was on the water and he said he was walking on the water. I think you've heard of walking on water story.
Yeah.
So he was walking on water, and then he told Peter, come out of the water. And people usually tell the story like, Peter came out, or he came out, he walked a bit, saw the waves in the wind, got scared, started to sink, and then Jesus saved him. But then I always wonder, imagine you're Peter, right? A fisherman. You've probably seen people drown, right? You know what storms, like it's not your first time on a boat, right? And so someone is saying, oh, come out. And in your mind, you're like, all the things that can go wrong are not perceived. They're like things you've actually seen. But then it is like, and then there were like 12 people in the boat and only one. So I can imagine the guys be like, yeah, Peter, you go. So when I relate that to like creativity it's like you just have to, people say blind faith. And I think you people think of it as like, again, like a cliche, but it's like the same when you don't know what people are going to think about a podcast or a video, but you can either let that perception of what they might think be what defines, the rest of your response to this, or you can be like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. Because even though my mind is telling me all these things, like the ways I'm going to just trust, because the person, so let's say in this case, the Jesus person in this case is that guru videographer or guru podcaster or Joe Rogan being like, I've been doing this for this long. Come on, Daisy, you can do it.
Yeah.
But then you're looking at like all these people who haven't started podcasts, and they're just telling you it's tough. It's tough, right? Yeah. But then it's like just trusting, like, well, if he Joe Rogan didn't, is it Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't like wake up, I believe he didn't like wake up and get like chaos and podcasting, right? He also had to.
Definitely doubt that.
Yeah. If he did, then.
He just got lucky that he started at the beginning when other people were doing it.
But I think the thing was he started. That's like the big difference.
And carried on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like people who started posting on Instagram and just being consistent, and people like did it and stopped. So then you realize, so it wasn't like it was also the like the work and the showing up every day kind of thing. It's like even when you said like with your podcast, like how the Daisy now, if the Daisy now was to go back in the past and talk to the Daisy who was not sure of what to start, and you can imagine what you'll be telling yourself, like you're gonna do this, and the you will be like, no, I'm not, and then you'll be, no, you can, which is weird. I feel like even if a future version of myself came and had succeeded in something, I still feel like I would be like, I don't believe you. I don't think it's just human nature to be, and I guess it does help to be afraid at sometimes. But yeah, it's like that is one thing I feel like I've met a lot of other creatives who you realize like the gap, like from where they are and where they want to be, the only thing that's holding them back is fear of the unknown. Just like what if, and then but if you can, and all the people that I see that are successful, like there's, I don't know, Crystal.
Oh yeah, the graphic design.
Yeah, like if you listen to him and his story, he wasn't as bold as he is now. But I think it's that like that mentality of, even though I'm scared, I'm leaning in, I'm pushing this thing, right? And then eventually you just gain momentum, and it's like, and you listen to his podcast and you're like fired up, and you're like, right, and you sit down.
Motivation.
Yeah, you sit with yourself for like 3 minutes. You're like, nah, I can't do this. Yeah.
I think, like you say, though, you never stop being scared, but you get used to leaning into that fear, and you still feel it in the same way. It doesn't go away, but it's like you can do it because you've done it already.
Yeah,
and it's that very. It's one of those super annoying things that people say, but it is that first time of just breaking past your fear, and you realize that actually all of those anxieties in your head of like, you might die if you do this. They're not real.
The friend that I was telling you about, who's an author, she asked me, we're at this creative group, and she asked me, I told her how I sometimes fear, like let's say you have the idea of a podcast, and then I don't know if you sometimes get this, you don't only fear it failing, but you also fear it succeeding.
Yeah.
So you're like, what if I get 300 people calling me, want to be guests, and just the uncertainty about that. And then she asked the very good question, she was like, have you ever wondered why you're afraid? So like, I'm afraid this might not work. And then she was like, why, have you ever thought of why your response to pursuing this is fear? Like what is causing you to fear? Right? Or what is causing you for fear to be the emotion that comes up when you want? And I was like, I never really thought of it. And then I was starting to think like, was it things that maybe were said to me as I was growing up, possibly, or was it experiences that I had that I thought were just normal, but there's maybe somehow influenced. Let's say you try to start something when you were way young, and someone was like, this is someone maybe you respected was like, this is never going to work, right? Or you are never going to achieve this. And maybe that sort of, without you knowing, you're like, every time you want to start something, your mind goes back to that reaction of, but I'm not ready if I'm out to achieve this.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's people you're maybe I'm not afraid of starting this. What I'm afraid of actually is if I start it and if it fails, is this person's reaction. So rather and instead of me dealing with that, oh wait, I shouldn't, maybe they don't, maybe their reactions can be completely different. I'm just assuming. Or maybe they're not even thinking about whether or not I'm starting a podcast, and here I am. And so when it helped me like sort of just think of like when I want to try anything and I'm like, oh, I'm so scared. Why am I afraid of it? Is it because I maybe, yeah, like maybe if I want to start, let's say, a shoe brand, and I'm like, oh, I'm worried it might not do well. Why am I worried? I'm worried people might not like it. Why are you worried people might not like it? Because I put people's opinions about myself, to a certain degree. And I'm like, oh, okay, so if I stop doing that, then maybe next time I want to start something else, I would move on quicker and won't get stuck in thinking. But it was an interesting question she asked, and I was like, well, I never thought of asking myself why I was afraid.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point, actually. I did a social media post on the Instagram account for Inner Avenue the other day, actually. And I was kind of there and I wanted it to be honest. And I was really thinking about what I wanted to say. And I realized when I was writing it, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it was like kind of my idea about what creativity is and the kind of things that I find difficult, I guess. And kind of following curiosity instead of fear all the time, and being like, well, I'm going to go this way instead. And fear of success was one of those points. I was like, I'm not scared of failing. I'm scared of it working.
Yeah. But I think I share success more than I fear. Because when you fail at something that you're passionate about, I guess, and you self-initiated it, you'll be like, okay, that didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it hurts, but you're like, but I think it's that fear of like getting a call, being like, can you be here? Will you just speak to this person? And then you're like, and then imposter syndrome, I think, really, really kicks in, and you're like, I don't know.
This is the thing, and I think this is part of the reason that I wanted to start the podcast as well, is so many people say the same things, like, they were scared and they did it anyway, and they started off not really being sure, and they still feel like they're probably not entirely sure of what they're doing in life. And I think it's
and then you look at them and you're like,
literally. And I think it's kind of thinking of creativity in that really broad sense of not just art or photography or painting or drawing or whatever it is. It's kind of creating your world as well. It's like when you're an adult, you have all of these opportunities that you could take and little paths that you could go down, but it's only you, like you say, that stops yourself, and you're like, well, I can't do that because of this reason. And so what if you just say yes instead of saying no all the time? What would you be then?
You'd have a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
That's the thing, I think, with my son, of how I feel like it's just like, I want to do this, I'm going to do it. And sometimes you have to be like, no, and he's like, why did you do it? I don't know. That's what he says, I don't know. And I'm like, you're frustrated that you're not listening, but at the same time, you're like, I wouldn't have that courage of just like, the thing, for example, I remember it was on, I think it was New Year or Christmas, I'm not sure, I was in Lidl. And as I was leaving Lidl, part of me wanted to just turn on and shout, Happy New Year, to everyone in there. But then part of me was like, no. And then I wonder, like, what, I ask myself, I don't know if you also find yourself and I ask myself, why do I feel restrained? Because it's not a bad thing, right? It's not going to get me arrested. It's probably going to even, make people happy. But for some reason, there is something inside me that wins as that, no, like, it's a good thing. It's going to give people joy, right? It is spontaneous.
Yeah.
But you like, instinctively, you're like, oh, no. And I was like, why do I not just, or maybe sometimes I just see random people on the street and I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to that person. And I'm like, oh, no, I won't. And then I'm like, I should have just gone, and because I talk to a lot of just random strangers, I'll just be like, hey, what do you do, kind of thing. Yeah. But then I'm like, why did I not do it? and the reasons are not like, oh, it's, they're not like reasons that are like just, it's usually just something inside of your head saying, you can't do this, or you would embarrass yourself. But my son, he would just, if he was like, unless he's like just worried, he doesn't like to speak to strangers. But if you were to be like, you in the public, like, oh, do you want to dance? And then he would probably just break. But for me, I'll be like, I'll hear a song, maybe I'm walking down the High Street, and I'll be like, I really want to bust a move. But then you're already like, who's going to record it? It's going to be on TikTok. It's going to be on Instagram. It's going to become a meme. Instead of being like, well, if it does, then you want it to be.
Might bring you more followers.
Do a move when you're like, by the way, subscribe, follow, notification bell, leave a comment. Yeah. So it's just that and I feel like with my art, I want to be that way. Like just in general, I feel like as a person, because I feel like that is the true version of me, right? I don't know if you sometimes feel this, where you feel like there's a version of me that is like this. Even I like want to on Instagram, I want to be more, just talk and be more present with what I do. But a part of me is like, is that a good camera angle? Is that, and
no, see, I was literally just going to say, I was going to be just do it.
Yeah.
I think it's like acting in the moment as well, isn't it? Because it's so easy to like have the idea, and when I feel like that, I feel quite impulsive, and I'm not really an impulsive person.
You just want to break it down on that.
Yeah, and just like, I really want to do this, I'm just going to do it. But you never do, you? And I'm,
yeah, you're like, and people are like, are you okay? I'm fine.
yeah.
Are you going to get up? No, I'm good.
Just like the turmoil inside.
Yeah, you're like, I want to. I remember we were walking down the high street one evening with some of my friends, and there was a guy who would sing outside, outside the Marlin, so just on that bit where sometimes pastors are. Yeah. And he had a phone, he was calling people up, like, do you want to come and he just plays a random beat. And inside, I really wanted to, but then on the outside, I'm like, again, like I'm living, I think it's the thing of like being in the present, but living in your mind, you're living in the worst version of the future. And then you're letting that version dictate what you're doing in the present.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. As opposed to being like, oh, I'm here now. There's this great opportunity. I'm going to capitalize it for good. I'm gonna bring people joy. And the thing is, the funny thing is, when you don't do that thing, you leave that place thinking like you're less happier than you were.
Because you didn't do it.
And then you're not beating yourself down. If you would have done it, you might have been a bit embarrassed, but you would have been like, oof, I just did that thing,
I think it's that feeling as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, knowing that you were hesitant or scared to do it, but once you do it, like there's just this feeling that you just can't really explain.
Yeah, and I think that feeling can, if you're then applying it in your creativity, imagine how many things you would be able to do. Exactly. Because when you were afraid and you did it, you're like, oh, I was afraid and then I did it. I was speaking to a guy. He's a business. He's the guy who was sponsoring the Bob event, Santos.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he told me, when you have a fear, he's like, it's not a fear. When you have a fear, turn it into a challenge. And then when you find, so I'm afraid of this. Okay, what am I afraid of? Becomes a challenge, and then those challenges become an opportunity, and then those opportunity becomes now you can make something from it.
Exactly.
So it's like maybe I'm scared of heights. Okay, if I'm scared of heights, I'm gonna now talk to someone who's afraid, who maybe the psychologist or the psychologist who will talk about that, and then be like, oh, I'm gonna create a podcast around fear of heights, and then now so you've converted this fear of like I'm never gonna go up to like now I'm gonna document my process of going up this thing, talking to different people. They're gonna see it. I'm gonna bring people along, and now you've already created something that is helpful that came from what was initially like I'm not gonna go up that thing, and that's the end. So it's like take the fear. Look at the challenges, convert these challenges to opportunities, and then now you're you're like actually when you have a fear, you actually have opportunities. And that's what you're going to do with these opportunities. I was like,
that's definitely true. I think that's the thing with social media as well. It's like there's so many pieces of content and videos of watching people do these aspirational things, and you're like, oh, I could never do that. That if people were able to kind of get past that like internal battle and do the things they wanted to do. They probably wouldn't spend as much time on social media because they're not looking for that kind of gratification from watching other people do things. But also just like you're more in tune with yourself. And I think in that case, you would almost get back to that more like childlike state where you're kind of
I met a
playing
guy
around.
who had cycled from Spain, I think. Or was it from yeah, I think it's cycled from Spain. He was going to Wales. And he said the reason why he was doing it was he used to watch YouTubers, and he was like, I didn't want to be a watcher anymore. I wanted to become a doer. So it was like I wanted to stop looking at people cycling, and I wanted to cycle. And then he just started doing it. Yeah. And I think it's funny, but I feel sometimes, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing. I experienced this when I was watching the couple, Emmett and Beck. They're like van lifers as they travel in their Canada, watching with my wife, realizing that at some point I even didn't feel like watching it because I realized, like it clicked, like these people are just like me, like just like me and my wife, like they're just like us. The only difference is they're not, like they're creating the content we're watching. So they have decided we are gonna do it. We are gonna renovate this van into a camper van, and then we are going to take it to places. Yeah. And the rest of us are watching them as if they live on another earth where things are different. They're like, no, they have a small business. They're solopreneurs themselves. So I think I think sometimes even when we watch, you don't see people as people. You sort of think they are, I don't know, you feel like maybe they have like little minions that come out and like, help them with life. Like you never see like, wait a minute. Which is funny, you would think with YouTube and I think it's happened with some people, but back in the day when, celebrities were so far removed from everybody else. But I think now some people, even with YouTube, like even if a YouTuber is down the road, like me and you, right? But I think we'll still talk, but we'll still go and watch YouTube as if we are not, like even when you watch as if you're not part of that kind of thing. And you're like, well, if he's doing it, especially people who just have like a really bad camera. Like there's a guy who's building, I don't know if you've seen the guy digging a tunnel under his house. He's a British guy, I forget his name, but he built like a tunnel from his house underneath in his garage. And his video footage is like, I think he uses like a GoPro, but it's like his personality and the fact that he's just doing it. Yeah. Millions of views, like he's big and he's not even probably focused on, oh, does this look good? He's probably always wearing the same clothes the whole time, but it's like that idea of like I don't know, maybe it's also perfection. I don't know what it is, but somehow we look at other people doing things and we see them as I don't know, like special aliens or from another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's because we also see the like aftermath of it happening, don't we? See the like carefully edited video things, and you don't see the mistakes or the things that went wrong or like the arguments.
Yeah, so you feel like most people's life is perfect. They never argue.
I think that does impact, even if we don't consciously think about it. It's kind of like that goes into your kind of psyche, doesn't it? And you're like, well, like we were saying, you can't make mistakes because you don't see mistakes. Yeah. It's like children as well. Their world is shaped by what they see, what they hear, what they smell. When they fall over, they're like, I'm not going to do that again. Like we'd almost like bypass that now. We're just like, I just want to do it and it has to be perfect.
It's funny when you said they don't argue. I've just realized that maybe because of seeing the things people don't do, you think that I will never do that. I can never do that, basically. Yeah. So you're like, oh, this guy has a podcast. He's got so many guests. Oh, I can never do that. Yeah. And so you just don't try. Or with the paintings, the price that I put, it's like in the past I'd never seen those prices. So when I first came to the UK, I think the first thing I commissioned I did for was probably like £50 something, and I was like, it's too much. Yeah. Then I went to some galleries and I was like, then I started charging, and then once you charge, I think a high price and you sell something, you realize, oh, that was it. Like that was it. The difference is just you charge 50 or you charge 500. Yeah. And there's someone who buy for 50 and someone buy 500. And I think not seeing that elsewhere, you feel like, oh, I can never do it because I've never seen someone do it, kind of thing. Even though you see the objects being sold, but you'd never see a person who's like, oh yes, this is what I did. I took this amount and then I took it, and like, which is like the same. People just see the podcast out there, like, well, I should have on my phone. I have to my dad not to call me. I have to, like,
It's very much secret.
Yeah. So it's all those things. Like I put my phone on silent, and I'm like, sure, when I turn it up, there'll be like so many phone messages. But you don't see that when you see that, like you're saying, the end thing is like so smooth and that. And I do, to be honest, I do get caught up in the perfectionist. And that was the reason why I started Play Music Work. I was like, I'm going to try and just record an episode without caring whether it's sound or whatever, because once I start that, I'll never release anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I started recording the videos as well. But even I started still pressing record when things go wrong, within reason, obviously. If it's someone else, I can't really do that. But when it's me,
you just put it out there, just let it get everything.
Yeah, I don't want people to have this kind of perfected view of what it's like to start podcasts. I want people to see that, you know, like, I'm not a perfect public speaker. I'm not like a practiced professional interviewer. I'm literally sat in my living room. Well, not even living room. It's the second bedroom that I turned into a living room. I spend a lot of time on the podcast as well, probably more than I should, really.
On the podcast?
Yeah, I'm not getting anything out of it other than personal fulfillment, which is fine.
That's what you're getting.
Because
I'm getting personal fulfillment.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing as well, isn't it? Not only are we trying to do things perfectly, it's feeling like there always has to be something else, some other rhyme or reason for it, other than just being interested and passionate about something.
Yeah, like just doing it because you enjoy it. I'm like, I just love it when I make this.
Yeah.
And I've made it. That's it. Yeah.
And you like to think that someone coming along who sees your artwork or listens to your podcast or hears music or whatever it is that you've created and put out into the world, it would help them or inspire them in some way, just the fact that you even did it to start with.
And the other thing I sometimes think of, like, when you think about it, like, okay, you're not going to be like here forever, right? So it's like, what do you have to, like, if you are going to be on Earth forever and everything you do is going to be used to, like, I don't even know, like, because you only have like you don't have all the time. So what if you can make something, just make it. Because that is like you sort of it's basically, that is what you're leaving behind to an extent. Like, that's, you're just making copies of yourself or versions of yourself so that other people can experience, whether it's your advice or your wisdom. And if you think of it in that way, like it's like you're given a child and you have to and they need to, let's say, play in the toddlers league, right? Because you know they're not going to be a toddler forever. You want to get as much training into them before they become a toddler. But if you knew like, oh, they're going to be a toddler for 100 years, then you can, how's that? You know, I'll give it 20 years. I'll give it 40 years. But I think if you flip the narrative, like, one, you're not going to probably be forever, but also there are probably people out there who are not where you are, but are maybe where you were 10 years ago. They would probably benefit from this thing that you think, oh, it's not relevant, everyone knows this. Because when you are them, you didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So even when you think people do, they don't, because you didn't know it either. So that should probably, and I was supposed to thinking of, what everyone else is doing, what, everyone is it good enough? It's like, no, just think of yourself.
Yeah.
And what would Edgar or Daisy of 10 years ago, what would they have liked? Just make it for them. Yeah. Just basically just like, again, telling yourself a story, like traveling back in time and telling yourself just nice things, you know? And then just, that's it. Like, that should be what something at least.
I think it takes almost like practice to think that way as well. Because I remember posting something on my story of like a poll, and it was kind of like, what if you haven't done a podcast episode, and what would stop you from doing it? And I think I put something like feeling like I don't know enough, or not having enough experience in something, or I'm not like a professional artist or a proper artist, whatever that means, and all of these kinds of things. And it was so interesting to see what people said. And I think there is a fear of like people just not realizing that what they know now would be useful to someone. Because like you say, if you went back 10 years or 5 years or something, everything that you could talk about now spontaneously. Like there's going to be so many things that we did alone before.
Yeah,
And you
all
like,
those things didn't exist.
it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be some sort of like nugget of wisdom all the time. Sometimes it could be the smallest thing.
yeah. Somewhat. A friend of mine reached out to me. I thought this was very sweet of her. She said like, because I think I had done a few podcasts and I was like, should I, when you watch the podcast, you're like, should I do it like that person?
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, I like yours because they feel like you're just talking to someone.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe that's something that I had not been, it's a thing I'll tell you when someone tells you, I like this thing about your podcast. It sort of like gives you validation, I guess, but also just makes you feel like there is someone, the one person who is completely like in tune with this and believing that that person is not alone. Then you're like, okay, then there's probably hundreds of other people. And I think the thing we probably forget is some of the people that we like and the way they do their thing, they're just being themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what's drawing us to them.
Yeah.
So if we imitate that, then we're just going to be copies of them. And there was a rapper who said, if you sound like your favorite rapper, I'll just listen to that rapper. Why would I want to listen to you, kind of a thing?
Yeah.
So I guess with this, like when you have people, I don't know if you ever see this, so you watch someone's video and you're like, I know exactly who inspired everything you do because you speak like them.
Do everything the same way.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean.
And then it becomes difficult to sort of separate your brand from that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's like getting inspiration, and I think that's creativity, or like with our initial conversation on interior design or architecture, where the client comes to you and they're like, this is what I want. And then you take it in, and then you sort of abstract it and interpret it back to them with the design in it and with the thinking in it, and in a way that they would be like, oh yes, exactly what I wanted. Even though when you look at the initial, you're like, no, actually you.
Yeah.
Not
what you wanted.
Yeah, it's not what you wanted, but
it's not what you asked for anyway. I think people need to see things sometimes first, don't they, before they know what they want.
Yeah.
And then it's like you can make the decision still like, well, you started it, but this is right and this isn't right. So I know what I want now.
Yeah. And because as a designer, as a creator, you can see those two things. But the person who is coming, like they have like it's like they have a toilet paper tube on their eye, and so they're only seeing that, but you're just like, you can see the entire image.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, bit to the left, bit more. You're like, what do you think? It's like, perfect. You're like, yeah, if only it's not that easy.
Yeah. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We save people lots of time.
Yeah. There's so many. I'm thinking of making, I don't know if I say this here now, because if someone else does it before me, then.
I can host it back.
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking of making, I'm not sure if it should be a poster or a t-shirt that says, like put a little art scribble and then say, oh, I could do that. And then in really fun text be like, but you didn't.
Yeah. Do you know what you should do? You should have it on the front and then on the back that you didn't. So someone's still thinking, when you look back.
Yeah, I can do that. And then you're like, yeah, but you didn't. That's a good one, yeah, but you didn't. And if I had then actual artist names, be like, but you didn't. And then put the person like someone did. And so be like, oh yeah, you could have. But
that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
The extra little
bit, like this other person did. So to be like, it's not impossibility, but you have to actually make it into reality. You can't just say, oh, I could have. Well, you stay with your could have.
Yeah.
And this other person is going to be making money from what they actually did.
Yeah. That just reminded me, actually, when we first met at the Modesto Exhibition, I remember you completely threw me off because I never met you before. And then I think you were describing
the
podcast
and you're like,
to me.
Yeah, and you're like, who is this person?
I was like, that sounds like me, but I got a bit jealous with my head.
I was like, have you met that this podcast? And you're like, no, I haven't. And I was like, are you sure? Like, no. But it was just you. So you didn't have you're having a moment of like where you were dissociated.
Yeah, it was so weird. Yeah, it's almost like this person just comes along with a mirror, holds it up to you, and you still don't recognize yourself.
I always think to myself, like if I met myself on the street, I wouldn't know who I am. I actually believe you think you would, but you probably wouldn't.
No,
you just would be like, that's a strange person. And it's like other people would be like, but you'd be like, what?
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing, actually, especially if you're doing your YouTube and having the art. It's almost like they're not different versions of you, but almost like you never quite know which way someone's got to know you a bit with your online presence, and then we.
The way you say online presence, people are gonna be like, "Does this guy have like a means?" Like, no, it's still online presence, but like even if you have one follower, I'm online, I am present, and someone knows me, and that's it. So you can actually use it in the CV. I have a big online presence. You have many followers? No, I just spend a lot of time online. I have 2 followers, spend a lot of time online. A big online presence. Yeah.
So no, you got a decent amount of followers, and also, I feel like I can say this as someone who works in digital marketing. You can say it even if you didn't, but I'm just going to leave that as a professional.
People are going to come on and be like, Daisy told me to tell you.
I actually think if you're genuinely creating stuff that you care about, I think it's better to have a small tuned in audience who care about what you're doing and like can relate, and you can kind of have conversations with, because at the end of the day, it is called social media. It's supposed to be like a 2-way thing, and so often it becomes one way.
Like that is just like there's an artist I follow. I don't know if you've ever watched Love, Death and Robots on Netflix.
I've heard of it. I can't remember if I watched it.
So there's the different artists make like different episodes, but there's one guy, his name is something Miego. I think it's Antonio Miego. I think I happen to say his name right in Spanish. But he had these prints he's done of these paintings, and I think at some point he was like gonna either give them away or like have a raffle. So he was like, I'm gonna, leave your comments or have a raffle. Yeah. And then you leave a comment, then you go and look and you're like maybe 600 comments. And you're like, even if you put like a very in-depth, like, oh, I love your art, the way they're like, I'm like, what are the chances he's going to read 600 comments and then find me and be like, and have like that response of like, well, thank you. Actually, when I painted this, have like what is it? We're going to have like a back and forth. Yeah. You're like, it's like it's become so flipped, Yeah, like it's anti-social media to an extent.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I kind of like this podcast being about people who are kind of creating something in some way in Southampton, because then not only do I have access to kind of sit face to face with these people, but also other people in Southampton listening and also have conversations with that person. It's not like this exclusive guest that nobody can access. Not really the point.
What she's trying to say is that she's interviewing people who are not famous. They're all not famous. Someone can say.
Well, so,
maybe from this podcast, I'm gonna be like, have you been on the In Avenue? I've been on the In Avenue. I'm gonna have it on my CV. Been interviewed on a couple of podcasts.
Yeah.
In Avenue there. Yeah. It's gonna.
You don't need a CV, do you?
Well, it's funny. You actually do need a CV. Mm-hmm. When I was applying for jobs in like when you're applying for jobs, let's say like on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I applied for a job at the University of Sussex. They were doing a research project on how COVID affected Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. They needed someone to do a comic. So I have to send it a CV. Okay. Because I think they needed an artist who had a background in working with like community groups, with young people, social projects. And I had, when I was in Tanzania, I worked with a city lab as a graphic designer and also as a research assistant. So we worked with people, we did a lot of one-on-one, and we also did like creative stuff out of that. Yeah. So I think that sort of sold it for me. So it was funny, like they see your skill, but I think they want to know as a like in when you're let's say in a crowd and you have to run a art workshop. So what we're doing with these young people was we'd ask them a question like, how did you feel maybe during COVID? And then we're like, can you draw like a little strip or a little comic or a little image showing that, expressing your response but in that. Yeah. And then we use those to, they inspired the comic book that we made.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm partly using the CV. Although you would think, in some other jobs, you just send like Behance or Instagram or website and that's it. Yeah. But I think depending on like I think this is also with like academic institutions, I guess.
Yeah.
People I found this is interesting. Like I think, again, with creativity and maybe with the whole concept of AI and all these things and how people think, this thing is going to take over. There are so many spaces that you, as a creative person, you think everyone is creative to an extent. You think like there's an abundance of, creative people just all over town. and people just like reach out and say they wouldn't plug anyone in.
Yeah.
But you go to certain areas. Like I was at a networking event, and there was someone presenting on PR and the importance of PR to like solopreneurs and creative people. But their slides, they didn't look designed. So like what we say, they looked like they were made on maybe PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Very basic. Not even like they can properly be redone basically, right? But this person does like big talks, big clients, and helps people really like get onto high places, right? But they just, for some reason, maybe they have not come in contact with someone who can be like, okay, let me take your presentation and make it more presentable, make it so that people want to, people are engaged, and like you maybe sum things up, or maybe talk about this and this, or maybe break it down in this way. Like they have, so that is that is how big the gap is, that someone who is helping creatives can have slides that are not, they don't look like they've gone through a creative. So one, it shows you the diversity of creativity.
Yeah.
Like if this person is not working with people who are maybe graphic designers, or has not come in contact with graphic designers, then maybe that has not come across. Second, they might just be making it like enough with these slides that they don't think a need to, which then that becomes another entry point of being like, imagine how many more people you can get if you like worked in your branding, right? So same with university institutions. You go in and you look at the presentations they do, that is another, and these are universities that have even art departments. So you have like University of Southampton, you have an art department, and then you maybe have a research, maybe medical research department. But for some reason, these two fields don't interact. And my definition of creativity that I'm trying to think and talk about now is that creativity isn't just like, can you paint, can you draw, can you sing, but it's like synthesizing ideas, right? So you have this department and you have this department. Creativity is like, okay, now I'm gonna bring this together so that someone who's doing research, marine biology, or just researching just the effects of diseases on a demographic group of people can make a great presentation, so that if there's a flyer somewhere, I will definitely look at it. Be like, oh, I need to actually, oh, this is what I need to do. I need to really check on this, right? Like get drawn to the report and not be like, oh, another report, another PDF kind of a thing. So I think that that gap in like, I don't even know where this is coming from, but yeah, the idea of like creative thinking, like there's abundance and there's everyone for everyone, and so there's no one for me. It's like, no, actually, it's just there's so many gaps in different places, but it's placing yourself in non-typical creative spaces is probably where you'd find some of your best clients, because they would never have experienced someone like you.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. I feel like that's a really good place to end. I'm glad we could talk for hours.
Yeah. We should start a radio show.
You probably need to.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting the call. Let's see, I'm getting them up in 8. Yeah. And I need to sort of get out now. I did bring you I brought you some posters to choose from.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, this was great. Are we supposed to end it in any way?
Yeah, we should probably end it, because I just said let's end it. Yeah, no, I feel it was really amazing to have you and
amazing to be here
pick your brains and get to know you a little bit, rather than just through your art, which is nice because you're a person.
Yeah, I exist, guys. I'm not an AI. Imagine, like, I just glitched now. But in the video, it wasn't real this whole time.
No, it's cool. Thank you for coming and lending us your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.